So here's a wild thought. Could the world's only superpower actually lose a war to a country it's been sanctioning for, 40 years? It sounds impossible, right? But according to one professor whose recent predictions have been shockingly accurate, it's not just possible, it's already happening. Today, we're going to break down his analysis of how this unconventional new kind of warfare could, believe it or not, topple a global giant.
And really, it all boils down to this one question. Think about it. Could the future of global power be decided not by billion-dollar aircraft carriers and stealth bombers, but by weapons that cost less than your phone? It seems crazy, but let's dive in.
So this is the claim at the heart of it all. It comes from a man named Professor Sine, who is an expert in game theory. The source material we're digging into today lays out his entire argument, that the United States is basically sleepwalking into a conflict that it is fundamentally, structurally unprepared to win.
Okay, so a claim that big, you've got to ask, why should anyone even listen to this guy? Well, let's take a look at why people are suddenly paying very close attention to what he has to say.
According to the source, the professor's credibility comes from his track record. It claims he made two huge predictions that, came true. First, that Donald Trump would win the 2016 election. And second, that a major conflict between the US and Iran would eventually kick off. So with a supposed 2-for-2 record, his third prediction, that America will actually lose this war, suddenly starts to sound a lot more chilling.
And this isn't just some abstract, far-off political game. No, the source material makes it clear that the stakes couldn't be more personal. It argues that if this whole thing plays out the way the professor predicts, the economic shockwave could be so massive that the money in your bank account could become pretty much worthless. And we're talking within a matter of months.
All right, so how on earth could this actually happen? I mean, we're talking about the US military here. Well, according to the source, the answer isn't about brute force. It's all about strategy, a very specific kind of strategy called asymmetric warfare. And this isn't something that just popped up overnight. The source states this has been in the works for 20 years. 2 decades of careful, meticulous planning by Iran for what it apparently sees as the final war against its biggest adversary.
Now here's the really clever part of this strategy. Iran isn't fighting this war directly. Instead, it's using a whole network of proxy forces all across the Middle East. And according to the source, these groups have spent years doing nothing but studying American military tactics, probing for weaknesses, and learning their response patterns. Basically, they've been gathering battlefield intel for a war without ever officially fighting it.
And this gets us to the absolute core of the argument, this idea of asymmetric warfare. See, the American military was built for a conventional Cold War-style fight. Our expensive tanks against their expensive tanks. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Today's battlefield is completely different. It's all about using cheap, simple, almost disposable weapons to take out those multi-billion-dollar systems.
And the perfect example of this? The Iranian attack drone. According to the source, you can build one of these things for as little as $500.
Now, prepare yourself, because here is where the math just gets completely insane. To shoot down that $500 drone, the US often has to fire an interceptor missile that costs around $2 million. You don't have to be a general to realize that those numbers are they're impossible. You can't win a war of attrition when your defense costs thousands of times more than their offense. It's just a matter of time. And these drones aren't just cheap, they are brutally effective. The source gives the Shahed 136 as an example. It's got a simple engine, but it has a massive range. It flies super low to stay on the radar, and it carries a pretty hefty explosive payload. It's described as a total game changer. But this whole military imbalance, as crazy as it is really just setting the stage for the main event. Because the source argues the real target here isn't the US military, it's the US economy.
So here's the big idea from the source material. Iran laws it can't beat the US Army in a straight-up fight. It's not even going to try. The real goal is to pull the plug on the US economy, to trigger a collapse so severe that the American empire just ends, all without winning a single traditional battle.
So how could they possibly do that? Well, the source lays out this chain reaction, like dominoes falling. Step 1. The proxies don't attack US spaces. They attack critical infrastructure in allied Gulf nations, think oil fields, water plants. Step 2. This wrecks their economies and messes up their ability to export oil. Step 3. This is the big one. Those Gulf states stop plowing their massive oil profits back into the US economy. The source says that's the pin that pops the so-called AI bubble in the stock market, which depends on that foreign cash. And the final step? A complete, full-blown U.S. economic collapse.
This entire attack plan hinges on taking down one single thing, what's known as the petrodollar system. For decades, this has been the foundation of America's economic power. Gulf countries sell their oil for U.S. dollars, and then they invest those dollars back into the U.S. The source argues this is the real center of gravity that Iran is aiming for, because if you cut off that flow of money, the whole system comes crashing down.
So, all of this leads to one massive glaring question, right? If the military risks are so high, and the economic risks are absolutely catastrophic, why in the world would the United States walk right into this trap? Well, the source offers up a few potential explanations.
This is really the biggest puzzle in the whole analysis, especially when the source claims that top military commanders were actually warning against this exact kind of conflict. So what gives? Why push forward anyway?
The source we're looking at lays out three possible theories. The first one is simple overconfidence, just a classic case of military hubris. The second is political and financial pressure from allies in the region. And then there's the third reason, which is by far the most controversial one the source puts forward, a secret agenda.
Okay, and this is where the analysis takes a sharp turn into some very deep conspiracy theories. The source explicitly alleges that powerful, secret societies, it even names groups like the Jesuits and the Freemasons, are the ones pulling the strings and orchestrating these global events behind the scenes.
And this quote from the source material really sums up this wild third theory. The claim is that these groups aren't operating on logic or strategy, but that they are following a pre-written spiritual script, trying to fulfill some kind of end-times prophecy, no matter the real-world cost.
So at the end of the day, the source's conclusion is pretty bleak. It argues that this is an unwinnable war in every real sense of the word. Just like in Iraq and Afghanistan, even if the U.S. somehow managed to claim a military victory, the economic and geopolitical damage would be so devastating it would actually be a catastrophic defeat.
Which really just leaves us all with one final, heavy question to think about. In a conflict where winning is actually losing, what if the only real victory is finding a way to not fight at all?